It is May 25th in the great state of Texas. Feeding the Dragon Show, Feeding the Dragon podcast is back. Ryan Ray alongside Chris Fitton. If you missed any of this broadcast, you can go download the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you find good quality podcasts. This one will be there. Mr. Fitton, we took off last week, but we are back in the saddle, and man, oh man, we have some stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, well, you're in the middle of like a home closing. It's just been, a busy time on my side of the aisle. So we took the week off. I think I really wanted to come back and talk about this tremendous 6-page, investigative expose that Tatiana Siegel and Patrick Bresky at Hollywood Reporter had come out on Friday that really resonated throughout my town, the town of Hollywood, but didn't really get past sort of that insider circle, which was amazing to me because I know like Ben Smith at New York Times and various others reposted and carried it and talked about how important that piece was. And I'll retweet it today so people on here can see it. But it is a fantastic in-depth look at Hollywood's engagement with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and China. And it points out some really nefarious situations that the Hollywood studios have found themselves in, and really highlights the issues that Hollywood has with staying on this current course of engagement with China, because China, quite frankly, is the largest market in the world right now for movies, and it might be for the rest of time. So there's a big issue in how we do it and how we do it as Americans and how we protect the really important interests that we hold dearly here as Americans. So that said, at 3 a.m. this morning, I get notified by Sky Australia, Chris Smith and Andrew Phelan, of this video apology that John Cena, who, by the way, I produced this movie Blockers that John was the star of right there, a tremendous guy and tremendously talented. And not only that, he's an amazing athlete and wrestler, and also can speak Mandarin, right? But a video comes out of this apology that he makes for mistakenly calling Taiwan a country. And why does he do that? Because Fast 9, which is a massive movie for Hollywood right now, is out in China. And it actually did pretty well this weekend, not as well as it should have. I think it will run its course roughly around maybe 240 million, unless this geopolitical issue rears its head, sort of akin to what Milan did. But he had to apologize in order to keep the CCP happy, the Chinese Communist Party, the government there happy with all the press and publicity that's coming out in regards to this particular story. So he did it. And not only that, he did it in Mandarin. Which, by the way, I admire because his Mandarin is fantastic. And
I can't speak it, but it sounded good.
Yeah, as I've admitted on this show many times, I don't speak Mandarin. I can pick up certain words, I can speak certain words, and I can karaoke certain songs. But that was really impressive. But the symbolism was quite off-putting, I think, by a lot of people. And then on top of it, the director of the movie is Justin Lin, another person that I admire greatly. And I worked with him on Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift way back in the day. Tremendous filmmaker and a great person too. And he's Taiwanese, which is even more crazy in this story. So what happened between that 3 a.m. and when Bill Bishop also told me about it, and then suddenly I'm hearing from the New York Times and various others, it's blown up. It's being carried on the left and it's being carried on the right. I have friends, I have mother-in-law, I have people asking about this. And suddenly this thing that we've been trying to draw attention to, which by the way, is just a canary in the coal mine. Hollywood is just a canary in the coal mine of the problem with American engagement with China, right? It's high profile. It carries a very strong soft power stick. It's something that we're seeing this Chinese Communist Party provide leverage against the United States, not just for the dollars at stake, but also for cross-border propaganda, cross-border censorship, and the soft power that Hollywood represents. And we're seeing the same kind of thing replicated in various other industries. This is not just Hollywood. So bottom line is, we finally, and I feel for John Cena because he is a great guy and he is getting caught in a political firestorm. And I'm not exactly sure how he's going to get out of it, but trust me, if I could help him, I will. But I also see this as the alarm that hopefully wakes everybody up to this issue. And it's something we need to all address together. This is not just John Cena's problem. This is not just LeBron James's problem. This is not just Adam Silver's problem. This is not just Elon Musk's problem. This is not just Nike's problem. This is everyone's problem, and we got to address it together. Otherwise, we will not have the leverage in order to fix it, and we are running out of time. So there's my opening monologue. How's that?
Great. So let me ask this question. I had a friend of mine who went on a show talking about Canada, and she said the state of so-and-so, and she knows their provinces, not states, and Canadian people got on her online like, oh, you don't know our country. We don't have states, da-da-da. And they kind of gave her a hard time about it. What would be the difference from saying that, which is an honest slip of the tongue, and we would look at her and say, oh, well, obviously she made mistakes, not that big of a deal. I don't know if she apologized or not. She's not super famous like that, so not enough people cared. But the viewers kind of gave her a hard time. It was just kind of funny because it's like, guys, chill out, What would be the difference in that, making that kind of a gaffe, an honest mistake, versus what Cena said? And how should we think about that from the American side?
Well, by the way, what Cena said, in just recognizing Taiwan as a country, which probably he regrets even bringing it up. I mean, if you follow the protocol of Hollywood and every other business, you just don't talk about Tibet or Hong Kong or Taiwan. Just keep it out of the equation, right? Which is nefarious in itself anyway. But like, let's just assume he should have done that. That would have been much better, and it would have been better for him in regards to getting pulled into this thing. But what's interesting is that if it was a Freudian slip, or he just brought it up because it's part of the dialogue that he felt like, naturally flowed in whatever the situation was, it just goes to show that that's actually how we've been behaving as a country towards Taiwan. I know we have ambiguity about how we recognize Taiwan as its own independent sovereign state, but at the same time, I think most people in the country recognize Taiwan as Taiwan. They don't think of it as China, and we have behaved that way. So it's very natural to say it. And it's also very American to say it in a lot of ways. So I think what became very pernicious about this situation is that he felt, or actually maybe he didn't feel, maybe it was the publicists at the studio, which, by the way, I'm not blaming Universal for this issue either. This is a Hollywood-wide, industry-wide issue. They just happen to be in the latest firestorm here. But they probably said to him and his team, hey, you need to apologize, because even though you believe this, even though Americans believe this, even though most of the Western world believes what you said, China doesn't. And right now, China is by far our biggest market for this movie, and we need to keep continuing that course. So you need to get out there and apologize ASAP so we can get back to where we were, which is generating money on behalf of this film.
So one user, this is according to the New York Times, on one of the Chinese social media platforms, said, quote, "Please say Taiwan is part of China in Chinese. Otherwise, we will not accept your apology." And according to the New York Times, this comment got thousands of likes. This is kind of the slippery slope, right? So whatever Cena's intent was, which I have no idea, I'm not going to speak to, he's going to spend a significant amount of time trying to craft and placate and word it. So, for instance, if you're not a geopolitical guru or you don't follow the China story, it would be easy for a normal American citizen to say something offensive about China, as far as Taiwan goes, because they have no idea. They don't know about the one China policy. You don't like. So for most Americans, it would be easy just to say the wrong thing and not even know, and then to try to start backtracking and to get on the right side is very tough. And so, is this something that Cena can actually thread the needle to not only get the CCP happy, but to get the people in China happy as well?
Well, Look, threading the needle is really difficult because, like many have compared it to, it's like having your foot in two different boats that are drifting apart, right? You end up falling in the water. If you take the Western side of the equation, you end up like Burberry or H&M or any of these others. If you end up on the other one, the pro CCP side, the pro China side, or the Chinese government side, you end up like Uniqlo or some of these other companies that have gone that direction. There really is no middle ground, but that's okay to me. I'm okay with that, because if we actually approach it in a way that says, in logical terms, there is no middle ground. We have to take a stand, and we have to do what's right and what feels right as Americans and as the West. That's the catalyst that can create a unification around this issue. China knows that their consumer, 1.4 billion of them, and by the way, 1.31 billion of them are not even members of the Chinese Communist Party. They know that those consumers want to have access to products and services coming from the West or coming from America. They know if they completely shut that out, there will be issues. There are people that expect those Western goods, those Western services, whether they're luxury brands, whether they're cars, whether they're movies. So if we unify around that principle, which is the Chinese Communist Party wants to keep 1.4 billion people just happy enough that they don't revolt, and the fact that they haven't fully implemented this, China 2025 internal sort of goal where everything becomes self-sufficient for them. They haven't gotten there yet. If we take those two ideas together and realize we can unify around this and create leverage so that we don't have to deal with this crap anymore, right? They will back off, right? What John Cena said can be firewalled from the Chinese people, from the 1.4 billion. And those are the people that the Chinese Communist Party prioritizes as the ones that they have to keep happy enough that they don't revolt. Now, what they're also trying to do is tell the rest of the world what to think, what to believe. And that's second priority for them, right? First priority is to keep power. Second priority is then to spread that power. But if we push back on their second priority, they're going to think internal and go, okay, well, we got to keep our first priority intact. And how do we do that? If they're unifying against us with the leverage of all products and services coming from the West, and we know our people expect those, expect to engage in them, expect to watch them, expect to use them, we need to allow those in. So we need to back off some of this crazy sort of second priority encroachment and stick with what we know best and what our first priority is, which is engaging our own people and believing we're the best leadership in the world. And that's where they can firewall this kind of stuff that John Cena says, or cut it out from any sort of social engagement in China, but allow the rest of the world to talk about it freely.
So here's my concern, Chris, is that you talk about John Cena, and I was it's kind of funny because he's got the whole, however it goes, the can't see me deal, and Taiwan's kind of like the can't see me country almost in the China side. There's a path here that if we're not careful, Americans one day will wake up angry, not at the CCP, but at China at large because of this type of pressure against their stars. So Cena, I think, from what little I know of him, seems to have a good reputation. As you have said, I've never heard anything bad about the guy. Kind of has that good old boy American spirit to him. He seems good, like a great guy. There is someone in the U.S. that if they do it to, the U.S. will rally behind. I don't know if Cena's going to be that guy or not, that they will rally behind. And my concern is that the anger doesn't go towards the CCP who's pushing this, but it goes towards China at large. And then we're in a worse spot because we didn't nip it in the bud now and direct our anger or our frustration at the CCP who's trying to control this narrative.
Well, that's true. I mean, I could tell you just from texts I'm getting from friends or from family members, people that haven't even paid attention to this issue whatsoever, even though I've been talking about it for the last 18 months really hard. Mm-hmm. They're upset at Cena. They're calling him a wimp or whatever it is, and, a traitor and blah, 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 right? And I'm taking his defense, I'm saying, you know what? He can do what you want him to do. That's right. But he's just going to get replaced by some other actor in that. And Universal can do the same thing, but they'll just get replaced by some other studio. And keep in mind, Universal has its theme park coming online in Beijing. So they got to be super careful around this issue. So it's just like, do you want slaughtered lamb, lone wolf, sort of opportunities to just add up to nothing? Or do we actually want to address it? And I agree with you. You're saying, if we don't deal with this now, we're running out of time. I 100% think we have a ticking clock here. And the fact of the matter is John Cena is extremely well liked. And he could lead the charge. I mean, quite frankly, I think he's right now in a position where he's going, oh my God, I just turned off my wrestling fans. I just turned off a lot of my biggest movie fans. Like, I mean, there's people like me that I think the world of him, and he just stepped in it and happened to be the unlucky one. But most people don't see it that way. Most people haven't been paying attention, and they suddenly see this guy speaking Chinese and apologizing about Taiwan. It looks terrible. So he's trying to figure out with his team how to navigate it. And I actually would say, if you're going to take one side or the other, look at China. China's market is passing Hollywood by now. Like the market share we used to have in the high 60, 70% is down to 16%. We're not making the money we used to. So in a way, I would sort of say he should take the tactic of, you know what, that was a mistake. I am American. I am a believer in democracy. What I just did to Taiwan, and quite frankly, my Taiwanese director, in saying that, I don't, mistake, sorry, please forgive me. Boom, he wins back these markets. And then what would be great is that other actors, other filmmakers, Justin Lin, the filmmaker of Fast 9, the other studios, the studio partners from IMAX to Hasbro to Mattel to you name it, they all rally behind John Cena. And they say, you know what? You said what we all wanted you to say, so we're going to stand behind you. And if there's any retaliation against you, then we're going to have a real issue with it, and we're going to stop doing business with China until it's fixed.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you are going to have. So Cena, would you put Cena as A-lister, B-lister? Where would you put him on the seat? Like he's not like The Rock, obviously, but is he a B-list celebrity? What would you categorize him as? I don't know how popular he is.
Well, I mean, celebrities are not what they used to be, where you can just green light a film because you can guarantee they're going to make a certain amount of income. I will say, if you're looking for a big lead, a guy muscular that has that certain chutzpah on screen that also has comedic chops, you're looking at The Rock, and then and behind him is John Cena. Right. The Rock is a true A-lister. The guy can open almost any movie. John Cena has to be in the kind of movie that really makes sense. So it's a real possibility that you could call him an A-lister in certain kind of movies and then maybe not in others. But he's a real talent. He gets paid a lot of money because he knows how to get people in seats. And he's also a great promoter. That's why he's out there talking about Fast 9. And that's why maybe the longer you're out there promoting a movie that in particular has China as a big target, you might walk right into it.
Right. I just wonder, and this is where I was getting at, is that the higher you go up the food chain, and I don't want to use The Rock's name here because I have no idea. I'm just saying, like a true superstar like The Rock, or Elon Musk, or someone like that, a true, like everyone knows celebrity. It feels like they would have their potential conflicts of interest more with China, whereas the potential B-listers, if you will, Cena would have some, but not as much. You almost might have to have a few of those guys and gals sacrificed to get the A-lister to reach down to them because they're a friend or something. And so we might actually have to have a few that are willing to give up the movie career, go on the speaking circuit, go on Fox or CNN or wherever, and yak about this and give up their Hollywood career so that they can draw the attention. Because I'm not sure if when you go above the Cena level to the true super megastars, Tom Cruise, The Rock, whomever, if those guys are really going to step forward because they have a ton to lose.
Yeah, well, you saw obviously Richard Gere has been battling with it forever, and then on top of it, Brad Pitt has also had issues ever since he did 7 years in Tibet. So there are a couple A-listers. I mean, Gere is probably not considered an A-lister, but Brad Pitt sure is. So there are those issues. And then there's obviously Quentin Tarantino, who's taken stands, who's probably not going to get movies in that market again, or it would be very difficult. So there are people taking stands, but they also don't look at China as such a huge opportunity for economic windfall. In fact, Judd Apatow, who's obviously been out there pretty vocal about this issue, he makes comedies, and comedies don't really translate into that market. So he has a lot of opportunity to speak out about it, mainly because it doesn't affect him. Now, where it would affect him is if Universal, which is where he tends to make a lot of his movies, or if HBO, where he makes a lot of his television content, and it's under the Warner Media Discovery brand now, if they said, hey, Judd, you need to stop talking about this stuff because it's starting to affect us on a corporate level, then Judd Apatow is going to have a big decision to make. Does he continue this course against his corporate providers, or does he actually decide, hey, I'm going to continue staking, I'm going to continue playing the party line with my, with who's giving me my paychecks.
Okay. I want to transition for half a second here, because since I've got to know you and talk to you about this stuff, and I go back and watch film now, like I start, it's kind of like that. Oh gosh, if you say, I want to buy a certain type of car, and then you see that car everywhere. Now I start to see this stuff everywhere. So I think this is kind of a good exercise from time to time to unpack. I went back and watched the Rush Hour series. It was on HBO Max, 1, 2, and 3. I'd never seen 3, so I went and watched them in order. Great movies, I love them. But episode 1, Jackie Chan character come from Hong Kong, and I was like, okay. I wonder, going back to films like that, do we look at those films now, or should we look at those films and go like, it's from Hong Kong for a reason? Because at the time, I'd have thought it's from Hong Kong because that would probably connect with an American audience. But I know before you've kind of separated out that maybe the films that have a Hong Kong based character, they're trying to divert from mainland. What's your read on stuff like that? How should we think about historical movies when the characters are Hong Kong based, not mainland China based?
Well, remember, Hong Kong used to be the gateway to China, right? And Hong Kong was also British influence and British controlled. And on top of it, the Chinese people in Hong Kong, or the Hong Kongese, they saw themselves as more sophisticated than the mainland, and they actually spoke their own language, Cantonese, which is not the same as Mandarin. And they were very sort of trailblazing in the filmmaking space, and the Chinese loved those Hong Kong movies. But as China started to catch up and make their own film industry and create their own film product that catered really well to their market, the Hong Kong movies started to get pushed out as far as market share is concerned. And then when the encroachment of China and the protests occurred, in 2019, and quite frankly, during the Umbrella movement too, there was a real push that, hey, we're China, Hong Kong, you're part of us, and eventually you're going to be really a part of us. And we really don't need you as much anymore as being a conduit to the rest of the world, but B, being a provider of content itself. And that's when you saw people like Jackie Chan, for instance, essentially re-residence themselves in mainland China and really incorporate themselves in the power structure of Beijing. I mean, he really has made a concerted effort to sort of separate himself from the old Hong Kong sort of homeland that he's from, and made himself mainland Chinese, particularly because of the economic interests involved with that.
Okay, that's helpful. What else did you want to get to today?
Well, by the way, I've been seeing questions like one question people seem to be asking a lot is just the contractual obligation. I mean, I've responded to some tweets on the contractual obligations of John Cena. Now, I haven't seen John Cena's contract. I don't know what it is, but I can tell you a standard contract for any actor, pretty much no matter what level they are, unless they have some no publicity clause, which if you're really big, you can actually ask for. But their job is not only to act in the movie and do the best job they possibly can to make sure that that movie turns into the best piece of content possible, but they're also obligated to go out and promote the movie when it comes time for the movie to be released. And one of the things that's super important is that there's all kinds of ethics and morals clauses in there so that whatever they're doing on their, side time, it doesn't affect some sort of negative sentiment towards the movie. But then on top of it, they got to get on talk shows. They got to talk in the press. They got to do things called press junkets. They got to show up to the premieres that the studio has. And then on top of it, if they make a mistake, and that is to the detriment of the film's revenues, they have to fix it. And obviously there isn't a pressure of you need to say this or else, but it's more in the case of John Cena, and I'm completely speculating, but I'm sure there were netizens or whatever that came out talking about this issue that he sort of stepped in with calling Taiwan a country. Universal's PR team talks to John's PR team and his reps and says, hey, we need to fix this thing. And by the way, in my book, I talk about how Michael Phelps sort of stepped in it after we made a big deal with Mazda after the 2008 Olympics. And he was caught smoking a bong hit on camera, and that circulated the world. And in China, drug use is really looked down upon. In fact, it's very criminal. So we had to prepare and create this apology video that he ended up doing. And he did it great. And it actually sort of won him more fans than he had prior to that, because it really showed him as human and he makes mistakes and all that other kind of stuff. That one's more ethics, morals clause related. This one is more geopolitical in nature. Like you're talking about Taiwan being a country that's not allowed, et cetera. So they work together to come up with what they want him to say. And what's brilliant, in probably not the most American way possible, seeing what happened here, is that he can do it in Mandarin. Like, that's a real gift. So it was fantastic for him to do. Now, what's also interesting is I don't know if it was lack of oversight or just lack of preparation or just thinking that it would be sort of something that was seen in China and not make it around the world, but somebody didn't really think about what would happen when that video started to make the rounds outside of China. And that's where this problem lies, because quite frankly, if that just stayed inside China, this would be a nothing burger. We wouldn't be talking about it. And quite frankly, I would probably hear about it and I might go, oh my God, what happened here? And some China experts might tweet it out, but it stays in the little bubble of China experts. Right. Here is a much different story.
And also, I'd imagine something like John Cena has revenue sharing based upon ticket sales as well.
Yeah. So a lot of these in the old days, the biggest stars had what they called first dollar gross, where no matter how much the movie cost, no matter how much the movie cost to go promote and market, whatever the first dollar came in to the studio, like 20% of it went to Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or whatever. Mm-hmm. Now, over time, those kind of economics really started to hurt the studio. So they changed a lot of that. And a lot of them have what they call cash break zero deals, which means once the studio recoups its full investment, like its actual investment of advertising costs and production costs, then the main stars will get a big piece of whatever comes in after that. And yes, that's a big motivator for John and some of the bigger stars. A lot of the smaller stars or the supporting roles, they really don't have that type of incentive, or it's much more minimal, but they're also under much stronger publicity clauses in their contracts too.
So if it's reported that John Cena made $10 million for this film, I have no idea, that would be the front end budget. And then the back end ticket sales could be that same amount, half that amount. Like, how much potential money is on the table for someone like John Cena based upon ticket sales?
Well, there's been there's been actually many articles over the years that, for instance, like Keanu Reeves on the 3 Matrix movies made $300 million, right? And $300 million is not what he got guaranteed to make 3 Matrix movies. He probably made, the first movie he made 10 million, say, maybe 15 million in the second one. And then maybe they gave him 25 for the third, but then he gets a huge piece of the back end. Right. And those movies obviously were blockbusters. So, you can get filthy rich with that kind of stuff. And what's interesting about Keanu is he's still one of the coolest guys on earth. The guy, I think he still lives at the Chateau Marmont and just drives a motorcycle around.
Yeah. quick side note here: if someone wants to pay Chris and I $10 million apiece with guaranteed money to act, we'll be happy to do that. My acting chops aren't that good, but I will take the money because I'm that kind of guy. Okay, a couple things, Chris, just to round out before next week's show or whenever we get back to it. I've noticed that the media coverage, we talked about this around China, is starting to change, especially around climate change issues. CNN had a piece of the day talking about the amount of emissions that China puts out was, more than anyone else in the world combined, basically, or a substantial portion. So no one else could do anything unless China does something. We've talked about the Uyghurs some. Now you're starting to see there's some pushback on the WHO investigation around the coronavirus. Trump going, if this Trump's fault, not Trump's fault, whatever. The narrative is changing. So maybe this Hollywood angle will fit into some of this other media coverage because there is some blowback from the media. It's not a lot, but there's enough that you could see a fire sparked or people start asking some more questions, and the Hollywood angle could be the one that kind of helps draw the attention to it. So what are your thoughts on where we're at with media coverage with China? Is it getting better, or is it just people like me and you follow it so much that we just happen to see it now?
No, I think 100% it's getting less partisan. I think there was definitely a belief inside the Democratic Party that there was a real issue with China, but to agree on that issue was to agree with Trump, which is sort of a crazy thought process, but that's just how insane sort of the bifurcation of our country has gotten. But now that Trump's out of the equation, I think it's a lot safer to say there are issues with China. In fact, I just got a text that I'm doing CNBC on Thursday, which, by the way, yes, I've done print for CNBC, but I've pretty much been relegated to Fox Business when it comes to the China issue. So that's a really big sort of game changer, I guess, in a way. But then also looking at the coverage of this particular story today, I mean, yes, you had the Breitbarts and the Federalists. By the way, Federalists even published one of my tweets today. And then you also had New York Times and CNN and BBC and Newsweek and all these others covering this story today. So it's really a hot button issue that both sides are talking about. And that's exactly what we need. And once again, I want to say that I don't want everybody mad at John Cena. I don't want everybody mad at LeBron James or Adam Silver or Elon Musk. What we need to do is harness that energy and harness the sort of harness the mouth agape sort of, oh my God, I didn't know this stuff was going on, and say, well, now that I know, how do we fix it? Because just one person, one company, one entity taking a stand is not going to get us anywhere. We need to unite on this. And it can't be just a left or a right issue. It's got to be united as a nation. And quite frankly, it's got to be multilateral with other Western allies. So anyway, we've been talking about this on the show since Christmas. And that's mainly because you and I met when you did that panel with Bill Bishop and Wall Street Journal. And we were talking about it then, and I was talking about it prior to my book coming out last fall. And this is a big, big issue. And I'm glad, I'm sorry that John Cena had to be sort of the catalyst for it. And I hope he can help navigate himself out of it and do some good on this thing. And I'm rooting hard for him because he is a good guy. But I'm just glad that this fire alarm has gotten pulled on sort of a mass basis. This is great.
Yep. Okay. And a couple things here. One, if you've enjoyed this podcast, go give us a rating and review in iTunes or wherever you find your podcast. Help spread the word. Two, our Watch for In the Same Breath documentary on HBO Max is still going on. The documentary has not been released. You can find some folks who have reviewed it. Apparently it was at some film festivals, but it has not been released. I know HBO and Discovery had a deal the other day. I don't know if that's going to help the situation, hurt the situation, or if this is just it's delayed for natural reasons. But I think the first time we ever saw on this podcast, it was talking about a springtime release, which we are closely exiting spring. I think middle of June is when summertime starts. So we'll see if they get it out in springtime. But I'm still looking for it and haven't seen it yet. And it's not getting a lot of traction.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. We'll see what happens there. And then on top of it, as we're waiting there, we're also going to be curious to see how Chloe Zhao and the Eternals and Marvel and Shang-Chi and all of that stuff play out too. I mean, there's some real game-changing moments in the space of Hollywood and China. And then on top of it, don't forget about the fact that we're less than 300 days away from Beijing 2022. And that's a real sort of red line in the sand that's going to create lots of controversy and lots of conversations too. So anyway, we really appreciate everybody, tuning into this today. Thank you for all the questions and all the interaction on Twitter. And please tell everybody about this podcast. We're really trying to make a difference. We're not just trying to be talking heads and bloviates and yelling at our soapbox. We want to be constructive and we want to get stuff addressed so that we can move together as a nation in a much better way.
And with that, we'll talk to you next time.